afternoon. This is Kade, the Wizard Wells, coming to you from Harrisburg East Middle School. Um, I wanted to thank Luke at the DM Lair for having me on his live stream. It was a lot to talk about for 2 hours, but a really, really great opportunity to share this message and get to teachers that maybe always wanted to use D&D in their school or role-playing game and not really knowing how to approach it. And Luke, the feedback has been overwhelmingly great. And so I thank you from the bottom of my heart. This campaign that I started, 9 years ago, almost 10 now, has really taken shape and has changed a lot of lives. And that's all I ever really wanted. So in that vein, that conversation, the data that I've been able to glean over 3 years of tracking a specific group of kids for that purpose has been asked for a lot. And so I wanted to do this episode about data, the data that I'm going to show you. The link will be in the description so that if you need this for administrative conversation or whatever, you can just grab it and use the video to kind of help guide your conversation if you want to. So the tests that were used for this were NWEA, and they took the test 3 times a year for the most part. They also take a state standardized assessment called Smarter Balanced, which they do 1 time, and it integrates writing components and listening and some things like that. So all of those tests were compiled each of the years that the kids had me, and their growth measure showed incredibly. So the funny thing about this is that, well, let me share a screen with you real quick so that you can just see it. So the funny thing about this is this was actually, this program was designed to track the COVID slide. And our district curriculum coordinator put it together. And you can see here the projected total growth of what they figured all students were going to get is this blue line right here. And that's the projected growth. And then the observed total growth of all students from our district looked like this. So you can see our school did well, did pretty well in terms of not losing anything during COVID. Of course, we didn't have a whole year off. We came back with masks and stuff that next year, the 2021, we came back with masks for the next school year. So then my kiddos were the purple line, and you can see that they start higher. That's because I teach advanced English. So their value is, higher. The score starts higher. Doesn't mean that growth is altered at all. In fact, that first year when I had those kiddos in 6th grade, when they're getting used to me and we're kind of starting to launch the concept of great ideas and creativity and product-based learning and D&D and stuff, you can see their growth measure was right on par with all the rest of the kiddos in the district. And then we get to the next year that they'll have me. I said, okay, you guys want the beginning of year spiel, or do you want to play D&D? And they're like, we want to play D&D. So we started making characters on that first day of school. And what is amazing here is this curve. I mean, it literally just tilts up. And if you look up here, this is Wells' total growth from fall 2020 to 21. They grew 3.91 percentile, and that is already amazing. If you look at the other projected growth, it's less than 1%. So my kiddos are growing almost 4 points in that period. Then the winter test, and this is where it gets really incredible, is it doubles. Like it literally doubles from 3.9 to 6.9. That is very, very hard. Now I want to address the conversation about, and then 6 to 9 to 12, and then 12 to 20. When they get to 8th grade here, they hit this little button, and I had the same kiddos again after, a course of 3 years. And you can see now the separation from peers. Now I want to remember this is growth. This isn't like achievement score. This is how much you started with and how much you gained. And so someone might say, well, those are advanced kids, they're going to do better. And in fact, after conversations with my principal, and my district coordinator, it's actually harder for advanced kids to grow in this way because they already start high. So if they're in the 88th, 92nd, 93rd, especially once they get into 94th, 95th percentile, it's very difficult for them to grow, right? To continue that growth because they're already so high up. So my principal said, and I think I would probably mention, yeah, they're advanced kids. Everybody's going to look at it with this sort of lens of like, oh, well, of course. And he said, no, dude, it's actually much harder to get those kids to grow at such a level because they don't have as far up to go. And I was like, wow, that makes a lot of sense. And so when you're looking at these numbers of observed total growth here from 3.9 to 6.9 to 12.9 to 20.25, it's like that is really incredible. And that's not just D&D. I mentioned this before. It's like what D&D has done for me as a teacher is in my classroom. I don't overassess my kids. You know, we have a lot of discussions. We do almost everything together. So these concepts that John Hattie brings up in his research all the time, collective efficacy, um, the experiential learning where you do something socially that is connected to the learning, and then the learning is remembered. The ability to have choice, these numbers definitely reflect the choices that the kids got to make because they're approaching learning through their own interest sets. I did a video about the multi-genre project. That's one of those things where like they do a ton of writing, a whole bunch of research, and they ultimately made the choice of who to do that on and what kind of stories to tell. And lots of thinking goes into that. Whole bunch of writing, multimedia. They make little videos and things, and so that's been just really really incredible. So yeah, observed total growth in the 3-year period was 20.25, and this has gone to my heart, you know, like this is really, really cool for me to see. And last year I had some 8th graders that I didn't have the previous year in 7th grade, which happens when you have a cohort and a couple different teachers that teach the same thing. And they were struggling to succeed. They're, you know, really low test scores and very low growth. And I said, well, let's make sure they get into my room for 8th grade and we'll see if it makes any difference. And it did. Um, they were the traditional disengaged student. I don't really care about this, even though, you know, smart kids still resist, right? They're just because they're intellectual by nature doesn't mean that they're motivated by that same nature. So I'm gonna stop screen share here. You've seen this data long enough. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? I don't want to share anymore. I don't want to share anymore. I don't want to share anymore. Stop. There we go. It's my first day. So, where was I? Oh yes, observed total growth. Oh, the kiddos that came into my room for 8th grade then, they grew incredibly. Like they didn't outscore their peers necessarily, but their growth was then measurable from where they started. And I knew that was going to be the case because they started so low. But what I've noticed in that is like, especially with any kids, it's like, okay, so they started low and you're on them all the time. And if they're distracted and stuff, and you thunder on them, that growth really isn't going to happen. Something actually has to happen positively in order to influence that student to try to do more, right? Like that's really all it is, especially in my cohort with advanced kids. It's not can they do it, it's will they do it, right? And so, you know, all us teachers know that you can't force a student to do anything. You can try to create incentive, and some kids care about their grades and some kids don't. You know, so what is the incentive? And I think the incentive for my kids ends up being like this environment that we create, and that they don't want to let me down and they don't want to like let their peers down, and they know that I collect data for, you know, stuff and things, and they like D&D because they are surprised they even get to play it. You know, this is the kind of kid that I've always talked about, like disengaged with school, and everybody thinks they're, you know, like low performers, and it just turns out they're really really bored by everything that everybody's doing. So my room seems to kind of elevate that. And I had a student just reach out to me not too long ago in 9th grade, and he's like, I don't know what spell you cast on me in 8th grade because like English is my worst subject right now. I'm behind in all this stuff. And he says there was something about being there that made it very effective. And he's very capable of doing the work, but has degrees of apathy sometimes. So that's where the data came from. Standardized tests, I didn't make them, right? They're the same tests that everybody takes. That's important, obviously, for collecting data. Then it was over course of 3 years, and I had those students for 3 years. Now, my principal is a big fan of tracking, and tracking means you follow kids from one grade level to the next, and he's always been a great big advocate of that. And in our advanced cohort here in Harrisburg, that's one of the only ways we actually get that. If we're not in an elementary school, of course they have that, but since we have 6th, 7th, and 8th grade advanced kids, we have a chance to actually track them and pick up where we started, or where we left off rather. And you can see how that makes a great change in a kid, especially if they like where they're at. If they don't like where they're at, then I think you would see the opposite effect. But all of us advanced teachers end up with such a great relationship with the kids, and that's what we want, because we want to build them up and make them really successful. So this is the Wizard Wells. This is just a really quick data crunch to show you. I'm sorry that it's just a single line graph with just some numbers across the top, but that's what data is. Data is data. I will plan on crunching data again at some point in the future, but it takes a lot of work to do it. And that one measure really shows me what I need to know. You know, keep in mind, like being I don't know, a teacher representative of Dungeons and Dragons is not a revenue stream for me. My job is to teach, and the data tells me what I need to know. So once I know what I need to know, I don't need to collect a bunch of data anymore. I'll do it occasionally in order to, prove a point. So I'm going to the South by Southwest conference in March, and I will definitely want some data from this year for my assessment at the end of the year for myself. So I will be collecting some data to see growth. But every year we look at data, of course, and hopefully it shows the same story that it's always shown, and that doing this stuff in your class is going to make kids happy and make them smart. That's what we're here for. That's all that matters, right? They're happy and smart. That's what we do. This is the Wizard Wells saying goodbye. Goodbye.